Hello and welcome back to An Exchange of Ideas, the Oxford Exchange's companion podcast. This week we will be looking at the current state of the Conservative Party, and we are joined by two lovely co-hosts.
I'm Dylan. I'm the incoming chairman and former editor-in-chief of the Oxford Blue.
And I'm Melissa Eddon, a contributor to the Oxford Exchange.
So this week, as I said, we're going to be looking at the Conservative Party, that old chestnut. And Melissa, you wrote about the Conservative Party in the latest issue of the Exchange. So what did you find out? What was the overall sort of impression of the Conservative Party post 2024?
My feeling is that they're still tired. They're still, exhausted from 14 years of mismanagement, as I like to say. But I think that they are more settled now. And I think they're kind of aware that they're not really needed in politics right now. We have a right-wing party with Reform that are getting a lot of votes. We have Labour who are doing terribly and can be everyone's villain. We have the Greens who are sort of entertaining the youth of today. And they know that they're not really needed, but I think they're kind of allowing themselves to step back, to regroup, to let other people make the errors, to then come back in with their traditional, we're good on money, we're trustworthy, we're strong on defence, we're strong on policing, and take back their rightful spot.
And it's quite interesting because as you sort of take us through in your article, it didn't start so well for the Conservatives post-2024. Kemi Badenoch was sort of unknown quantity. No one really knew who she was, and there was a lot of discussions about will she last as leader. I remember some suggesting she wouldn't last very long at all. That has kind of changed. You've spoken to many councillors, and they've found themselves becoming quite content with Kemi Badenoch, believing that she's kind of learned on the job. What do you think it is that she's learned that's caused this change?
I think she's learned, and the Conservative Party have learned with her, that the changing of leaders is just, it's not working. And we're seeing that with the Labour Party, right? Like, people are saying, we don't want you to change leaders. We really are just not interested in your, small politics. And I think that's led to kind of a settling in the party where, to begin with, there was a lot of talk, and for a while, actually, of finding someone else that she was, she was boring, she wasn't doing enough, she wasn't active enough, people didn't like her enough. And I think part of, that settling has really helped her feel like she can make errors and learn on a job that is new to her, as all jobs are to anybody with a new job, and kind of it not be the end of the world. I think if you imagine joining any job and you think your first error means you're going to get fired, that's not a comfortable situation in which you can learn. And I think that the Conservative Party are beginning to understand, as Labour play out their errors for them again, with all the infighting and the lack of any real movement in the party, that what they were doing before is part and parcel of why they failed so much, because they created a culture in which no development was possible because it was kill or be killed.
Would you say that it's more of an image thing than a policy thing, or is it? I mean, the policy creates an image, but then, in the sense, sort of the Conservatives aren't going to abandon all of the stuff they had before.
No.
So, in essence, it's sort of a situation where they've got to convince people they're different, but also still conservative.
Yeah, I think it's it's tough, because I think you could ask a lot of people on the street and they won't be able to tell you a single Conservative Party policy. They know that they're tough on policing and tough on crime and but an actual policy, I don't think anyone can really name one, because they're not cutting through on policy. Yeah. But when you do see Kemi Badenoch, it's stood opposite Keir Starmer, and she's managed to, maybe for the first time, get a good one-liner, and her party are really happy with her, and that kind of thing. I think it's kind of showing, at least for me, a harking back to a time maybe where things were slightly more stable and the Conservative Party could kind of be seen as the right people to critique Labour, and I don't think that people see Reform as the right people to critique Labour.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's so many sort of aspects there. I mean, in terms of the Reform Party, what do you think? Let's say they didn't make it into government, or let's say they had a government and then they were in opposition and Labour were back in power. Well, I mean, I suppose, would that be the same as the Conservatives?
In terms of Reform being in power in comparison?
So I mean, their nature of their critique in opposition.
I think reform are perfect for today's like current political climate, but I think that everybody's dissatisfied with that climate, right? Like reform are flourishing, don't get me wrong, but in an ideal world we wouldn't be as we are right now. And I think the Conservative Party can kind of put forward in the way they critique that they're doing it measuredly, respectfully, that they think that Labour are stupid, but that they are at least going to, you know, be sensible politicians who can like wear a tie and be polite. And I think people do kind of miss that. They do miss the fact that, you know, at one point there were things that you just would never critique about a person's life. That it wasn't about what the politician was doing behind the scenes. It was about what they were doing in real life. That, you know, the 24-hour media cycle is not actually benefiting anybody. And I think people know that. But Reform are the only ones that have latched onto that. And I think when people start to see, as Reform gain more power, the kind of things that they do, the way that they critique, the way that they push certain things, like dancing on stage at party conference, people will be turned off by that. And I think there is a sensible...
Maybe sleepless nights as well.
Yeah.
Insomniac.
The insomniac.
For context, just for anyone who doesn't know, the Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, Andrea Jenkins, I don't know if entertained is the word, but appeared on stage at Reform Party conference with a self-titled song, a self-penned song called "I'm an Insomniac." Go and search it on YouTube if you've not seen it already. It's quite.
I mean, it didn't matter if it was self-titled or not, to be honest, because in essence, I mean, it's not like there are many other lyrics to base a title on, so anyone could have named it.
There is actually a full song that apparently was released. Yeah. She's a classically trained singer, but anyway, not
you
that
couldn't
that's actually.
tell that.
No, you really couldn't. She was singing over a backing track as well.
Yeah, in a jumpsuit.
Anyway, with this, we talked about Reform, but with all of that in mind, does that suggest there's a way back for the Conservatives? If Reform aren't quite able to do what the Conservatives have done so well in the past, obviously with some aberrations and mistakes, and obviously with some pretty calamitous things that have happened. But in terms of like two traditional parties where we kind of expect Labour and the Conservatives broadly to like, if you disagree with their policies or they make a few mistakes, you broadly expect them to be like this almost respectable kind of model of politics in some areas, and hopefully enough areas that people see them as respectable and worth voting for. Do you see a way back for the Conservatives in light of Reform perhaps not being so much like that?
Definitely. I think there's a good proportion of the population that are just sensible people who are not expecting entertainment from their politics, and they're not expecting wonders immediately. They just would quite like some change on the ground quite soon. And they're not really seeing that with Labour. Maybe they've been patient with Labour, and they look at parties like Reform, which are quite frankly quite unserious, and they're just thinking, that's not for me. And the Liberal Democrats are just kind of not filling the space they should be and could be right now. The Conservative Party's had this opportunity to kind of, the people who are maybe too pretentious, as one councillor said to me, or maybe too proud of their Tory identity or just their right-wing identity and their sensibleness to go to Reform. There's a good group there for the Conservative Party. I don't know maybe if it's enough to win an election, but I think there are enough centrist people in the world who are unhappy with Labour, do not like Reform or Greens, can't see Lib Dems going anywhere. The Tories could come into that, I think.
And following on what you just said, your conversation with councillors were really, really interesting. Because first of all, I can imagine local councillors for any political party are quite a fun bunch, eclectic bunch, but they had some interesting things to say.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I found was interesting was that some councillors said, despite the fact that they lost over 500 seats, that it was time to celebrate with champagne. Why do you think that that's a celebration moment for Conservatives?
I think because it's one of those things where the feeling in the party is relative, right? Like, on paper, a 500 seat loss is terrible, but they've had so much battering, and finally the media's not looking at them, and they're allowed to just be like, take a breath, and they're allowed to make these errors and it not be front page on the news and people are getting sacked, right? Like, suddenly the stress is off them because they're not expected to be top of the polls. They're anticipating that Reform's going to do well, and so any movement that's even slightly far, like an inch away from terrible, is better. And I think as well, like, Kemi's helped with that in that people are gaining like a lot of confidence in her. There was a lot of people I spoke to who said, like, I started off thinking she was so boring. I voted for like anyone else in all the elections. I was not in a good place with her, and I was ready for someone to take over. I would have preferred James Cleverly, whatever. And now they're like, and now I see it. Like, now I get it. I see, like, she's grown into it. And I think, like, the Conservative Party is not built for this, like, modern media time frame, right? And so, like, they are celebrating because they're almost in control of their own destiny, and that they're allowing things to go slower, and going slower is going well. They're not rushing things. They're not making errors. They're not putting out huge policies that aren't working. They're being steady, and that's the Conservative way. They're steadily steering the ship. They're not, channeling forth. It's quite good.
And on that same frame of things that the council has said, it's interesting because we were talking before. So many parties these days feel like they're becoming one-man bands. I mean, with the Greens, obviously Zach Polanski is their big star. I would challenge you to name some of the other Green MPs. It's the same with Reform. Nigel Farage is the big star. If anybody knows who Sarah Poachin or Danny Kruger or other Reform MPs are, it's not really feasible.
Or they've been to party conference.
Or they've been to party conference. Or maybe even the Conservative Party
and then had
conference
sleepless nights.
But
because they're an
some
insomniac.
have blamed the shadow cabinet, saying that Kenny Badenoch has had to pull all the weight because they've not quite stepped up. And it is interesting because the shadow cabinet minister who's arguably got the most cut through is James Cleverly, who wasn't in the shadow cabinet to begin with. Do you think with the rest of them that the fact they've not cut through should lead to a change of personnel or a change of strategy or some combination of both?
Well, the fact that James Cleverly's cut through kind of makes me think that it is possible, right? But he also does have like decades worth of recognition behind him. Like he is one of the faces of the 14 years, good or bad, and he's quite well like reclawed his reputation. He's not done anything too bad. I would say, I think hopefully strategy, right? Like if we are sacking people because they can't get their faces on 5 TikToks a day, like that shouldn't be a good barometer for politics. I know that is modern politics, but like we said, the Conservative Party shouldn't really want to be about that. They should set themselves apart. I think that strategy is definitely different, but I also think maybe right now is just not the time. Like I don't think we need more faces for people to find issue with. I think we have, like you said, a few one-man bands that we should critique a bit and slowly will collapse. The brand of Zach Polanski is not always going as well as it should be. Same with Nigel Farage with the £5 million donation. Like
that has sort of not received a lot of attention.
No.
I mean, it took quite a long time before anybody really looked into that put it under the spotlight on sort of like televised media. I mean, there was the Newsnight sort of part with Victoria Derbyshire talking very much about that and really exposing that, but really a lot of this stuff doesn't really get a lot of criticism, and perhaps because the Reform sort of contingent in Parliament is a lot smaller, so they benefit from the polling boost and the media wave because they're seen as a threat, but they don't get the same media attention in terms of scrutiny because they're not in office.
And also they're so new that, and like you said, not in office, that their mistakes don't really lead to any consequences. Like his £5 million donation looks bad, but we can't see your prime minister, and that's terrible. Like we almost allow Nigel Farage to be a bit dodgy because it's Nigel Farage and he's our chum, and like he's curated himself really well. But for the rest of the party, it's so new that their errors on their £30,000 on flags or whatever it is they spent, like that doesn't have too big an impact just yet. But this is the thing that I put in my article, is that like as we see more reform councils, more errors are going to start to emerge, and we're going to see on the ground, I think, a lot of people realising that the promise of reform is really just a promise of lots of middle-aged people who are quite disgruntled with the country being very angry and thinking politics is for them, and actually having no idea what they're doing, which is not much far off from the critique people were giving the Tory party earlier on. And I think that the Reform Party will prove to be much more dangerous because they don't even pretend to give off an air of competency. Like they love the fact that they're new and we're not the establishment, but like that is going to be dangerous.
And you have started to see that. I mean, obviously towards the end of last year, Sarah Poachin went on to Talk TV and made the not very good claim and about black and brown people on the TV, which was, some would argue that it's racist. There's been all sorts of other slip-ups like that from Reform MPs saying things that, aren't the greatest. And you also see it sometimes, I guess, although obviously I'm not accusing anyone on the Green Party of racism before I say this in the same way, but you do also see it with Green MPs sometimes saying things that don't necessarily seem the most serious, but they are still cutting through, and that can't be ignored. But we're at a point in British politics where this could actually all change in the next few weeks because we are at a by-election in Makerfield. Now, nobody's suggesting the Conservative Party will win this by-election, but there's these scenarios could have different knock-on effects for the Conservative Party, because you could get Andy Burnham back in Parliament. Now, that could change, I guess you were saying in a minute, that may change how the Labour Party does or is perceived. If Reform do badly as well, it might cause their already leaking of votes on their far right to an even further right party that didn't even believe that was possible. But there you go. Restore Britain.
Yeah.
It is worth noting about Restore Britain. They got nowhere near as much money as Reform. But and they've also got nowhere near as many council candidates. So it would take quite a bit of effort.
No,
I mean,
I'm not saying they're going to be in government, but I'm saying they could quite easily stop Reform winning and let Labour or the Tories through, which is what the polls say could happen in Makerfield. Do you think that an Andy Burnham victory and or Reform losing votes on their far right, how do you think that could impact the Conservative Party?
I think the Andy Burnham victory is dangerous for Kemi because Andy's very charismatic, right? There's almost like the cult of Andy Burnham, where he's great and he's done amazing things in Manchester and he's going to bring that spirit to Westminster and it's going to be amazing and I can't wait. And Kemi then doesn't have any of that force behind her. It's almost like she's met her perfect parallel with Keir, because neither of them are very good at cutting through and neither of them are very, charismatic in the way you'd like them to be. She's definitely getting better, but she's not Andy Burnham, she's not Nigel Farage. I think that's dangerous for her because it's going to expose her weaknesses. And I think if I were her, I'd be praying for Keir Starmer to carry on. I wouldn't want to be having Labour have any kind of hope of getting better.
This is the interesting thing is, if you look at Prime Minister's questions, very much when Keir Starmer was leader of the opposition, he would have this sort of lawyer persona. He'd come in, he would forensically unpick all the mistakes, all the different things the Conservatives have done. But when he's in opposition, when he's not in opposition and he's actually in power, and you've got the Conservatives, he starts scrutinising them. And it's a very odd thing. I mean, at some point, he sort of forgot he was Prime Minister. He sort of misspoke. It's sort of like, and sort of does the Prime Minister, oh wait, sorry, no, I'm the Prime Minister. And it's sort of, this kind of politics is sort of like, will Kemi fail to not get that kind of forensic treatment, or is that something that Labour will steer away from once Keir Starmer sort of disappears in the long distant future? I'm not saying be now, but
I think
he's no longer leader one day.
What Labour should be focusing on is not attacking other people, right? Because the Conservative Party, quite frankly, are not really doing anything. Like, there's not all you can critique them on is a media statement, right? And the last 14 years that everybody's heard and everybody's kind of sick of hearing, because it just seems a defence mechanism now for Labour. Labour need to be changing the way they communicate to focus less on what Reform are saying and what the Conservative parties did, and instead talk about what they are doing right now. And I think that Andy Burnham needs to bring that positivity, right? Like, when he speaks about Manchester, he's rarely speaking about the fact that the party before them didn't do very well and that, like, Manchester had been let down. He talks about what he's done and what Manchester is now, and that's what Labour need to be doing with when they talk about England and Britain now. They need to be saying, look what we're taking it to, and this is the mission and this is the drive, and stop looking back and stop looking like either way and trying to find someone else to point fingers at. Like, I think Andy can take them in that direction, and I think in a way that would also just be better for Kemi as well. Like, any way in which they're not getting critiqued, I think, is a good way for her to just settle in more. But I do also think that she needs to learn much better how to communicate and critique, like you said, more forensically, but also just, you need to feel like she is as engaged with what's going on as like Andy Burnham and Nigel Farage, and I just don't think she feels very much like she's someone who's sat in an office all day and has come out having looked at her notes, rather than a person who is in politics, in Westminster. She's everywhere, she's here, she's having lots of thoughts, she's engaging with all these people, and this is what's coming out of it. Like, she feels too isolated, I think.
She's very polished as well when she speaks. She came to Oxford to record the Next Generation's podcast about 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she was very eloquent, very good at articulating her points, has a very down-to-earth personality in the room. But the one thing that was interesting was a lot of what she was saying didn't necessarily translate into the kind of modern sort of political media landscape in terms of sound bites, for example. In terms of getting that message across really quickly, because this is something that sort of Farage, Polanski, all of those Reform and Green kind of party politicians do so well. They have this very clear, very brief, very strong media presence on social media platforms in a way that Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch haven't really challenged in a really impactful way. It's very stilted. You're probably going to see them standing there saying something like, "Hello, I am leader of a party, I think this." Actually, I don't think this. I apologise for this. I think they should think this. It gets very boring. Should politics be more interesting? Or is it a necessity, or is it sort of like it's just boring? And does it need to go back to being boring?
I think politics needs to go back to being boring, but I think right now it's almost impossible for like Labour and the Conservatives to get these sound bites because they're not trading in the same currency that like Reform and the Greens are trading in. Like for Reform and the Greens, there's a one-word solution. It's either immigration or it's taxing the rich. That's kind of the way that they're pushing it. Whereas the nature of being centrist is that you are in the middle, you're thinking about both sides, and you're coming to a conclusion that kind of is in the middle, and that implies nuance. And it's really hard to get nuance across in a 5-second soundbite of I hate immigrants or I hate the rich. Like that, you can't do that for Labour or the Conservatives.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch did well. There was that video a few weeks ago that she challenged. There was someone who was arguing against her, her sort of stance on immigration.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And that got loads of clicks, loads of views. But all of the interesting stuff she's saying, the stuff with actual substance, nowhere to be seen in the internet. Really.
Do you think this is partly though because of quite prolonged period of both for Labour and Tories a kind of failure to kind of touch many people in this country? Certainly in lower reaching areas of society, lower class areas of society, like the area where I come from, you get people who feel completely destitute, who feel like they've got no hope, who feel like politics just doesn't speak to them. And depending on if they're left or right inclined, they either go down towards the Greens and want tax in favour of the rich, or they go down towards the right and they go for reform and anti-immigration. Do you think it is partly because, as perhaps noble as the aim of centrist politics is to kind of calm politics and touch quietly on our lives, do you think it has failed a group of people?
I think absolutely. I think like 100%, and I think that there's so many reasons we can think of for that. But I think in terms of media communication in that sense, people don't really have the patience now to sit and wait and hope that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, because people waited for a long time for that to happen and they've not got anything. And then they've done that again with Labour and they've still not got anything. And I think
their patience is a lot shorter.
Yeah, a lot shorter.
Only 2 years in and we're already talking about sort of reform government.
And like, will there be a general election? Like there was a betting website set up for when the next general election will be. And it's like there's no people. The standard 4-year terms are just, or 5-year terms are completely like forgotten now. It's almost like a standard of like the next day, like what the poll's looking like, and it's just
a week in politics can be a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly.
No government has served a full 5-year term since the Cameron-Clegg coalition, 2010 to 2015. It really, really has been.
I thought the Conservatives. I suppose it's different administration. Yes. In that sense.
Yeah. That's the last time the Prime Minister served a full 5-year term.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of. And I think it goes back to the idea that politics is sort of slightly boring, slightly mundane. It doesn't need to be this adventurous spectacle. But then we had Brexit,
and that has just changed.
Yeah, it's sort of like Pandora's box. Yeah. Once you open it, you end up with all sorts of views that are much more easily sort of posted on social media, and it coincided with a time when TikTok was becoming big, when Instagram Reels were becoming big, when you've got podcasts, when you've got a daily.
Jason says if he actually uses either of those things.
I have a phone, which is always a good
That's
start.
Good.
So that's a good start. For the rest of us who are actively on.
Welcome to the modern age.
To bring people to complain about those things, but Yeah, the thing with it is our politics is always going to be sort of turbocharged now. I don't think there's really any way back.
Even
But
to
it's
get
how
into,
do the Conservatives deal with that? Yeah.
I mean, like, even, and not to get too much into Brexit, but like with Brexit, the very nature of it is without nuance, right? Because you're voting yes or no, leave or stay, right? But there's no nuance in that, because what does leave mean and what does it mean to remain, right? Like, what are we keeping, what are we getting rid of? Do we leave everything? Do we leave some of it? What do we want it to look like? What even is the EU?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many questions here that are unanswered, and all that is left are two words that you have to choose from. And that's kind of set the tone now, that it's this or this, and whatever's in the middle, I don't have time for, it's too complex, it's not about me, that's just too deep in policy, or it's not going to make an impact, or people are too busy and have too little patience now to sit and wait and trust somebody with their long-term plan.
Do you think part of it is that there's just not much education on politics, and so people find out things for the first time through social media? I mean, people I know back home in an area where, unlike many places, people aren't that political because people don't have the time to be political because they've just got so much to do. They've got lives, they've got stuff to do, they've got to make ends meet. But friends from back when I was in school, I mean, somebody thought Piers Morgan was the Prime Minister rather than Keir Starmer, and didn't even know the name when I asked of the leader of the Conservative Party.
Yeah, exactly.
And thought Nigel Farage's name was Michael. Now that's not. No. That's not a slight on those people at all.
Nigel Farage, Michael.
That suggests that something has gone wrong with political education of young people that might drive people to populists on the right and left.
Definitely. I think, like, for example, it's so much easier now when you have literally like TV in your pocket and a TV that's like tailored to specifically the right kind of politics that you like. Whereas, 20 years before, everybody had the same TV and the same news channels that were generally sort of in the middle, sort of centrist, sort of didn't have any opinions and were just trying to say what was going on. And everybody was getting the same flow of information and could make their decisions from that. Now, I can go on my phone and I won't receive a single right-wing thing because it's just not what I engage in.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know what the arguments are, and I don't really know why people are convinced of that way. The polarization is crazy, and there's no incentive for people to turn on the TV because they'll see an opinion they don't like and turn it off. You don't have to do that on your phone. Your phone figures it out for you.
And like, you could be watching and I could be scrolling on Reels and I could see the Green Party where they're all having a little rave and think, oh, that's quite cool. And then I might be shown, oh, Kemi Badenoch's doing whatever, and I could be like, oh, well, I don't want to see what she has to say, so let me put not interested.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, I guess, is it's actually quite hard for voters to touch new audiences and reach out to new places, politicians to reach out to new places. And that just makes it all the more harder for the established parties to compete with that. Maybe the Tories should start having raves, just like the Green Party. I dread to think what that would look like.
Especially when the Tories have been written off as well. Like, they've been so written off with this 14-year slogan, fair enough. Like, when you now have new parties who don't have a legacy you can critique and who are really, really good on social media, like, what is the incentive to, hunt down Kemi Badenoch on Instagram? There isn't any. Like, you have people who are more charismatic, more talking about things you want them to talk about, who have raves, who do not have a terrible legacy, and who seem to like young people, when all you've heard for 14 years of the Conservative Party is don't really seem to like young people and can't do any of that.
That's why I think the Green Party gets so much traction, because the Green Party, love them or hate them, they have a lot of policies targeted directly at young people, whereas young people could go Labour, they're for old people, Lib Dems, old people,
so much.
Conservatives, young people, Reform, young people.
That's true.
They don't, but the ones that do are certainly not voting for the Conservatives or for Reform for that matter, and that's the problem that the right of British politics would have to
I also think
work
the
out.
Greens are really good at getting that like cohort of maybe like the middle class who are, I don't want to do a Kemi Badenoch stereotype, but who are maybe a bit more woke and maybe a bit more engaged in like academia and that kind of thing, who maybe, have a subscription to the New Statesman or whatever, and are just more the intelligentsia and don't like Labour and obviously hate the Conservative Party, think Reform is stupid. But the Greens maybe offer a bit more of like, you care about the environment and you also like, fine with me because I'm middle class, but the super rich you don't like, and I'm okay with that. And they've kind of curated it so that they can tap that group of people, they can tap the youth, and they don't feel as stupid as Reform in the way that they're doing really outlandish things and being very like rude often. And then they're never offensive.
And the raves are entertaining compared to I'm an Insomniac.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But to take it back to your article, when people read this article, which they can do by going and looking at the Oxford Exchange and the Oxford Politics Society, what's the one thing you would really, really like people to take away from this article?
I think the Conservative Party right now are, in comparison to other parties, quite boring. And I think we often in the media and just in conversations I have with people, often what we all say is like, reform get too much attention, right? Like, why have they got so much attention before MPs, whatever? And I think part of writing this article and part of discussing this article, reading this article, thinking about it is that if we don't want the attention to be on reform, as people who write things, we have to not write about reform, right? We have to take the conversation away. We have to recenter it and think back and think about solutions for the people that we've written off. And so I think, like, I'm not saying that you need to vote for the Conservative Party at all, but if you don't want reform, you have to think about the alternatives out there for the people who reform are appealing to, because we can't have everybody voting the Greens, because that's not democracy. We can't have everybody voting Labour, but we do need more middle ground, like opportunities or alternatives, and so that's what this is.
The answer is basically vote Lib Dem.
Yeah, vote Lib Dem. Yes.
And you've of course spoken to Ed Davey before. Your lovely Cherwell interview. So perhaps you might be getting a commission.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, on that happy note, thank you for listening / watching this lovely podcast episode. The lovely transition to Ed Davey is a brilliant note to end on, of course. And if you want more brilliant notes to start and end on, you can watch further episodes of this podcast on the Oxford Exchange magazine YouTube channel, and do make sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as, of course, read the magazine, which is on the Oxford Politics Society website. Thank you for watching. I have been Jason Manning, the editor of the Oxford Exchange, and
I've been Dhillon Lalji, the former editor-in-chief and incoming chairman of the Oxford Blue.
I've been Melissa, the contributor to the Oxford Exchange.
See you soon.
goodbye.
Bye.